Okay, getting right into it today on this deep dive, we're talking about something that, well, let's be honest, everybody loves to talk about. Infidelity.
It's definitely a topic that gets people going.
But, and here's the thing, we're not just going to dish about who cheated on who, right?
Right.
We're going deeper. We're asking the tough questions about betrayal in relationships.
Yeah.
Like, is infidelity always the worst thing, the ultimate betrayal?
It really forces us to look at things from different perspectives, to challenge those assumptions we all have about relationships, what we think we know.
Yeah, exactly. And to guide us through this tricky terrain, we're using Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs. You familiar with it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the complexities of modern relationships.
For sure. We're focusing on Chapter 12, The Rebellion of the Rejected. This chapter really got me thinking about all those people who feel betrayed within their relationships, before any affair even enters the picture.
Yeah. Perel makes this really interesting argument that sometimes the person who has the affair might actually be reacting to years of neglect or mistreatment from their partner.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a story from the book, Mona and Dexter. Dexter, the husband, never actually physically cheated, but he spent years emotionally abusing Mona, putting her down constantly, isolating her from her family, even controlling their finances. So, talk about betrayal, right?
Absolutely. And it highlights this crucial point. Emotional angst, financial control, constantly criticizing your partner, those things can be just as damaging, if not more so, than an affair. But they often don't get the same attention, do they?
It's like it's harder to see.
It's hidden.
Hidden in plain sight. And it makes you wonder, why are we so fixated on the physical act of cheating while often ignoring these other forms of harm in relationships?
Perel actually brings up a pretty shocking statistic in the book. 91% of Americans believe infidelity is morally wrong. 91. And that's even higher than their disapproval of polygamy, cloning, or even divorce. So, yeah, it really shows you just how deeply ingrained the taboo is around infidelity.
We put it right at the top of the list of relationship sins.
Exactly. Even when other hurtful behaviors have been going on for years.
So then the question is, why is infidelity so taboo? Why do we as a society react so strongly to it?
I think it boils down to our beliefs about monogamy. Our culture really idealizes monogamy as the model for relationships. Anything that deviates from that is seen as, well, a huge violation. But what if we looked at infidelity not as the root of the problem? What if it's actually a symptom of something deeper, something that's already broken in their relationship?
Okay, so back to Mona and Dexter. After years of Dexter's emotional abuse, Mona ended up having an affair. And for her, it was actually what gave her the strength to finally leave that toxic relationship.
It can be a real turning point for people. It can force them to wake up and demand the respect and love they deserve.
So then, is it ever okay to justify infidelity? Because of what the other person has done? That's a tough one.
Right, and there are no easy answers. But what's crucial is to understand the context, to look at the years of accumulated hurt that might have led someone to that point.
So don't judge. Try to understand.
Exactly. Infidelity is complicated. It's rarely black and white.
And Perel has all these other stories in the book, right, to illustrate this point.
Tons. Like Rodrigo, whose wife was completely emotionally unavailable for years, or Julie, who was married to a workaholic who always put his job first.
Yeah, I remember those stories. And it really makes you think about all the ways people can feel neglected in a relationship.
And that feeling of neglect can be really powerful. Perel calls it displaced intimacy, where people go outside of their marriage to find the emotional connection they're not getting at home.
And sometimes that connection turns physical, turns into an affair.
Unfortunately, that's often what happens. People are starved for attention, affection, validation, and they find it in the arms of someone else.
It's almost like a cry for help, in a way.
It can be. And, one of the most controversial ideas Perel puts forward is that sometimes affairs can actually help preserve marriages.
Really?
Yeah. She shares some examples where people use affairs as a way to cope with problems in their marriage.
Okay, but how does that work?
Well, it's complicated.
I bet it is.
Let's maybe take a break here and come back to that in the next part.
Yeah, good idea. We've covered a lot already. Definitely a lot to unpack.
So where were we? Oh, yeah, affairs helping a marriage.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Sounds kind of crazy.
But it can happen.
But when we talk about unmet needs in a relationship, the conversation often goes straight to the bedroom, right?
For sure.
And Perel, she doesn't shy away from that at all. She dives right into the whole issue of sexless marriages.
Yeah.
It's pretty surprising how common it is, actually.
Yeah.
She mentions this statistic, like 15 to 20% of couples have sex less than 10 times a year.
It's way more common than people think. But nobody wants to talk about it.
Which makes it even harder to deal with, right? I mean, what even defines a sexless marriage? Like, is that the right term?
Good question. And I think just the label itself can make people feel, I don't know, ashamed or something.
Like there's something wrong with them.
Exactly. And then on top of that, our culture doesn't really help. We often downplay the importance of sex in a long-term relationship.
We're supposed to be all mature and evolved and above that, right? Like, as long as you're raising kids and paying bills together, who cares if you're having sex?
Right. But for a lot of people, a lack of sex in their relationship is a huge deal.
Yeah. It can lead to resentment, loneliness, and, yeah, you guessed it, the desire to look for that connection somewhere else.
It's not just about the physical act either. It's about feeling desired, wanted, seen by your partner.
And when that's missing, it can be devastating. Perel shares these stories, like Isabel's, who's been in a sexless marriage for 10 years. Her husband just lost interest.
And no matter what she tried, she couldn't get that spark back.
It's so sad.
Think about the impact that kind of constant rejection has on someone. Their self-esteem, their sense of worth.
They start to question everything about themselves.
Absolutely. And then you have Brad, whose wife just shuts him down every time he tries to initiate anything. Always tired or stressed.
Yeah, I remember Brad. He just wants to feel close to his wife.
But she keeps pushing him away.
And the crazy thing is, both Isabel and Brad, they love their partners. They have good relationships otherwise. They enjoy spending time together. But that lack of sexual intimacy is like this giant elephant in the room.
It starts to affect everything.
Yeah, the resentment builds up. Communication breaks down. And it's no wonder people start to think about straying.
There's a quote from Perel that really sums it up. Being cheated on makes people feel insignificant, but feeling insignificant for years on end may lead people to cheat.
Wow. Powerful stuff. It really flips the script. Like maybe the person who cheats is actually the one who's been feeling betrayed all along.
It's a different way to think about it.
For sure. And it makes you realize those little betrayals, the everyday rejections, they can add up. They might seem small, but they can do real damage over time.
And you know, Perel also talks about mismatched libidos. When one partner has a much higher sex drive than the other.
Yeah, okay. So like when one person wants to have sex all the time and the other, not so much.
Exactly. And that can create a lot of tension in a relationship.
A lot of tension.
She tells a story about Christoph, whose wife just stopped wanting sex after they had their fourth kid.
Oof. Yeah, I can see how that would happen.
And he felt like he had to stay in the marriage because of the kids, but he was so unhappy.
Yeah, but it's hard, right? Because then you have all these societal expectations. Women are supposed to be mothers first and put their needs aside, and men are supposed to want sex all the time.
It's like a lose-lose situation.
Totally.
The partner with the lower libido feels pressured, and the one with the higher libido feels rejected.
It can tear a couple apart.
And you know what? A lot of people who have affairs don't actually want to end their marriages.
Huh, really?
They're just trying to fill that void, you know, to find that missing piece. But they still value the life they've built with their partner.
So they're almost trying to have it both ways.
Yeah, kind of. And this brings us back to that idea of affairs preserving marriages. Like with Gina, she's unhappy in her marriage, but she's staying for the kids.
Not Gina.
And she has this affair that gives her a sense of joy and escape.
It's like a way to cope. But is it ethical? I mean, it's still deceiving your partner.
It's a tough question, for sure.
No easy answers there.
Perel doesn't try to tell us what's right or wrong. She just presents the situation and lets us wrestle with those tough questions. You know, the motivations, the justifications, the consequences.
And then there's this idea of segmented marriages.
Right, where couples accept that their partner might not be able to meet all of their needs.
So like maybe they have separate hobbies or friendships?
Or even, in some cases, other partners.
Whoa. That's taking it to a whole other level.
It's definitely a more radical approach. But Perel suggests that it could be a healthier alternative to, you know, all the secrecy and deception that usually comes with affairs.
I mean, wouldn't that require a ton of trust and communication?
Absolutely. And that's why it's not for everyone. It takes a lot of maturity, self-awareness, and a willingness to kind of redefine what a relationship looks like.
Okay, so if we're willing to go there, then the big question becomes, is monogamy the only valid model? I mean, Pearl seems to be suggesting that maybe it's time to consider other possibilities.
She thinks that clinging so tightly to monogamy might actually be part of the problem.
Like if we don't even allow ourselves to think about other options, then we're more likely to cheat when our needs aren't met.
Right. If we don't talk about it openly, then it's going to happen in secret.
So maybe the key is to be more honest with ourselves and with our partners.
Exactly. To have those tough conversations about what we want from a relationship, even if it's unconventional.
And who knows? Maybe that honesty and openness could lead to stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
Potentially.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
So I guess the big question is, what does the future of committed relationships look like? I mean, if traditional monogamy isn't working for everyone, where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? So much to think about with all this, huh?
It really is. I mean, we've covered so much ground already with Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs.
It's such a thought-provoking book.
For sure. What's been the biggest takeaway for you so far?
Well, I think it's how Perel flips the whole traditional infidelity narrative on its head.
In what way?
Well, she doesn't just point fingers or judge people. She really tries to help us understand why these betrayals happen, what motivates them.
It's like instead of asking, did they cheat?
Right.
We should be asking, why did this happen?
Exactly. And those answers can be a lot more complicated and a lot more revealing than the cheating itself. So for this last part, I thought maybe we could dig into Perel's ideas about, what she calls new options for marriage.
Okay.
She kind of hints that the traditional model might not be working for everyone these days.
I remember that.
Even suggests that, being so fixated on monogamy might actually be contributing to infidelity.
Interesting.
Like we put all this pressure on marriage, on our partner to fulfill all our needs, emotional, intellectual, sexual, social.
It's like we're expecting one person to be our everything.
Yeah, that's just not realistic, is it?
No, not really.
So Perel's saying that maybe divorce or a lifetime of no sex shouldn't be the only options when couples hit these roadblocks.
So then what are some other options?
Well, she talks about alternative relationship models, like consensual non-monogamy or polyamory.
Where people have open relationships.
Yeah, but it's not just about sleeping around. It's about couples negotiating what works for them, being honest about their needs and desires.
So instead of sneaking around and being deceptive,
right,
you bring it out in the open.
Exactly. And Perel uses the example of the gay community where open relationships are often more accepted. She thinks hetero couples could learn a lot from that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, it's not about saying monogamy is bad, but maybe it's not the only way.
Maybe we need to be more flexible in our thinking about what a committed relationship can look like.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's about creating a structure that works for both people, allows them to grow, to explore, but still have that strong bond.
Okay, so let's say we're open to this idea. I mean, I imagine there's still a lot of resistance to it. A lot of people think monogamy is the only way to have a real committed relationship.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It challenges a lot of deeply held beliefs, religious beliefs. But Perel, she doesn't shy away from that. She talks about those concerns.
So what does she say?
Well, she acknowledges the risks. I mean, it can be tricky, right? But she emphasizes the importance of communication, of setting clear boundaries, making sure everyone's on the same page about the rules.
Yeah, so it's not just a free-for-all.
Right. It's about creating a model that respects everyone's needs and desires.
It's almost like by being so rigid about monogamy, we're pushing people toward infidelity.
It's like that forbidden fruit, right?
Yeah. If couples aren't even allowed to talk about other possibilities, then they're more likely to go looking for them in secret.
And that just leads to more pain and betrayal.
So Perel's advocating for more honesty, more openness, even if it means challenging conventional ideas about relationships.
Because ultimately, that could lead to stronger, more fulfilling connections.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is.
This whole deep dive into the state of affairs has been, I don't know, it's just been really eye-opening for me.
For me, too. It definitely makes you rethink your own assumptions about infidelity, betrayal, and I guess the future of relationships in general.
Yeah, because it seems like things are changing. People are questioning the old rules.
And Perel's work reminds us that relationships are always evolving. There's no one right way to do things.
So I guess the key is to stay curious, keep learning, and talk to each other.
Exactly. Talk about what we want, what we need, and be willing to challenge those old assumptions.
I like that. Well, this has been another deep dive, folks.
A deep dive into some pretty deep waters.
That's for sure. We've covered a lot today, but as always, there's so much more to explore. So keep those conversations going. Keep asking those tough questions. And remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself.